Hello and welcome back once again to the Wrestling Group. I am your host as always, Ryan, and today we're going to be taking a look at AEW's Blood and Guts matches of the past, and then we're going to rank them from worst to best. Now this week, AEW will be holding their 5th Blood and Guts match on a special episode of Dynamite, and their 6th. So this year will be the first time ever that the women will get their own Blood and Guts match, and I cannot wait to see just what they have in store for us. So the Blood and Guts match is basically AEW's version of the War Games match. 2 rings surrounded by massive steel cage to keep them from getting out. 2 teams enter one by one with no pinfall or submission until every member has entered the match. Unlike WWE's version though, AEW's isn't PG friendly, and anything and everything can and will happen. Like, they call it Blood and Guts because you're expected to see a fair bit of blood. There has been 4 Blood and Guts matches so far, with the first coming in 2021. So here we are going to rank them from 4 down to 1. Now, I do tend to say worst to best, although, to be honest, none of these have been bad. So we're just some better than others. As always, feel free to let me know in the comment section below how you would rank them from 1 to 4. And if you haven't already, don't forget, please hit that subscribe button now. So we'll start off as technically the worst. Coming in at number 4 is the Inner Circle versus the Pinnacle in 2021. The first ever one they did comes in last place. That's not to say it was awful, but a few things factor into why it comes in last. So for a start, this was just coming out of the COVID era, so you still couldn't have a full crowd in attendance as everyone had to be distanced. This was held at Daly's Place, which usually holds around 5,000, but during this show they were only allowed 1,900 in attendance, so that's even less than half, which for me obviously plays a part of the crowd. You might think that they're not really into it as much, but they are. It's just the sound isn't as great when it's half or less than half arena. So the Pinnacle were a faction put together by MJF to rival the Inner Circle, but it failed to catch on with fans, and not long after this match, they split up, and it's very rarely ever mentioned in terms of AEW's history. So if you remember the Pinnacle, it was like MJF, Sean Spears, FTR, Tully Blanchard. As expected for their first crack at it, the Blood and Guts match itself experienced some teething problems, including some clunky spots and instances where guys were just sort of lying around and not really doing a lot, waiting for their next spot. On the positive though, Sammy Guevara really stood out in this match, with him being involved with many of the big spots of the match. The main focus of the story was the hatred between MJF and Chris Jericho towards one another, which was clear throughout. The end of this one is the main reason for me it comes in last place, as Jericho and MJF end up on top of the cage fighting, while everyone else sort of just stopped and watched, which was a bit weird and awkward, to be fair. Like, I think the camera angle, they expected you to not see the people in the cage, but unfortunately you could, and you just basically watched them watching the fight on the top. The fall off the top of the cage by Jericho could have been done better as well. From a different camera angle, it wouldn't have looked that bad, but from the one you got, it just sort of looked a bit cartoony and very cushioned. You know, it looked like he was just falling off onto a big mattress, which he probably did, to be fair, but on a different angle, it wouldn't have looked like that. So the Pinnacle getting the victory meant that at the time they had plans for this faction. They did not come to fruition though. It's still an enjoyable match and worth checking out if you haven't seen it already, but for me, because of the reasons I've just mentioned, this one is in last place. So in at number 3, and it's Team AEW versus Team Elite from last year, 2024. Unlike the other Blood and Guts matches, this one didn't really have much of a story going into it. It was basically the Elite had run wild on AEW for too long, and some of them had grown tired of this and came together to fight them, although Team AEW ended up just feeling thrown together. It was sort of Darby Allin and whoever he could find at the time. Obviously, Swerve and Hangman were in the middle of their blood feud, so the Elite used this to get Hangman on side to face against Swerve, who was obviously part of Team AEW. Only problem was it was a separate storyline, and to be fair, it did remain to feel that way until just the end of the match. This one had a great start though. Darby Allin entered first, but was ambushed by the scapegoat Jack Perry on his way to the ring. He was powerbombed then into the side of the cage, and then he was sent crashing into the steel steps before being thrown into the crowd. Both men then fought throughout the crowd before heading back to the ring. Jack then set up a trash can in the corner and launched Darby like a lawn dart into the can. A great start and a great setup for things to come. One by one, other members came out. The Elite always having the upper hand. Obviously, they won the advantage beforehand. So they had the upper hand going in. Mark Briscoe was the first member of the match to be busted open. Nick Jackson, though, for this one was the star of the match, with him getting most of the big spots. We saw a lot of different weapons used throughout, including Bowens using an actual pair of scissors, for obviously the Acclaimed and their scissoring. Anthony Bowens decided to use an actual pair of scissors. When Hangman's music hit, he refused to come out until obviously it was Swerve's turn to enter, and he would then attack Swerve and cuff him to the outside of the ring before entering and locking the cage. Jeff Jarrett would be the one to come down and break Swerve free, and he would then finally enter the action. We got a great spot from Swerve, to be fair, when the Bucks revealed that the briefcases that they'd brought down to the ring, in fact, held staplers in them. They all attacked Swerve with the staplers, for him only to just laugh it off and then go into a fit of rage. The end of this one is why it ended up only coming third. Jack Perry took an unprotected chair shot while tied to the cage. Darby then drenched Jack in gasoline, threatened to light him on fire unless he was given a TNT championship shot. At All In, Matt Jackson then verbally quit for his team, and the match was set for the next pay-per-view. A little anticlimactic, to be honest. It felt like this was all just to get a TNT title match instead of this being like the sort of end of a rivalry or a feud. They could have easily have given Jack Perry and Darby Allin the match anyway, but for the fact he used blood and guts to get that title shot did sort of feel a bit anticlimactic to me. So in at number 2 is the Golden Elite versus the Blackpool Combat Club. This is in 2023. Now, this one is the longest of the Blood and Guts matches. This is clocked in at 51 minutes long. As Takeshita and Pac had temporarily linked up with the BCC. This was obviously before Pac had fully joined with Mox and the gang. The Golden Elite had worked together as a full team with Kota Ibushi in New Japan years previously. When you think of Blood and Guts, you think about the violence, and this one had a large amount of violence in it. We had a fork, chairs, nails, tacks, glass, tables, and chains aplenty, with each team looking to cause as much damage as possible. This match started out with Kenny Omega versus Claudio, which started it off as a really good wrestling match before the chaos that would later come. And then one by one, the ring filled up with team members, with the BCC always having the numbers advantage. A great spot came in the match when Ibushi saved Omega from and then drove Mox into a bed of nails. Another great spot saw Pac hanging from the cage roof and dropping feet first onto Matt Jackson, who had been laid out on a table, with them both crashing through. The Golden Elite took control of the match. They cuffed Mox to the cage before laying out Claudio and Wheeler. Pac had seen enough, decided to leave on his own accord before things really fell apart for the BCC, as Don Callis then removed Takeshita from the match as well. This left the numbers game as 5-3, and the Elite would then use a chair to choke out Wheeler as Mox watched on helpless, still cuffed to the side. So that is number 2. So in at number 1, there can only be one because there's only been 4. In at number 1 is the Blackpool Combat Club versus the Jericho Appreciation Society in 2022. The second ever Blood and Guts match comes ranked in at number 1 for us. This match was simply chaos at its best. Easily the most violent match on the list, with all these men putting everything they had into it, and they ended up all absolutely coated in red. Eddie Kingston had persuaded the Proud and Powerful that they would be better off without Chris Jericho, and that led these 3 guys aligning with the BCC for this matchup. Obviously, Kingston and Mox already had their history, with Mox then being the glue to hold the team together, as obviously Eddie Kingston and Claudio couldn't stand each other. This one started out again with Claudio starting the match with Sammy Guevara this time, with Claudio dominating the early stages, throwing Sammy literally from one side of the ring to the other, and then picking him up and launching him from one ring to the other ring before Daniel Garcia entered to help Sammy. One by one, each guy would then enter the ring with the JAS, having the numbers advantage throughout. It's mad to think that at this time, BCC were the babyface team. There were a good moment in the middle of the match when Claudio cleared one ring and Jake Hager cleared the other. They stared off at each other, Excalibur giving it a call back to their previous team, and fans chanted, "We, the people." In a memorable moment and chilling visual, Angelo Parker was left hanging off the side of the cage upside down and absolutely drenched in blood. Jericho and Eddie won a battle on top of the cage before Sammy would also join them. Eddie would hit Sammy with a low blow before tossing him off the roof of the cage to the announce table below. Claudio then climbed to the roof and hit his signature big swing on Jericho, which looked cool visually. Daddy Magic then climbed up to save Jericho, and Eddie had Jericho in a submission as Claudio then put Daddy Magic in a submission also. He would then tap out. For a second, Eddie thought he had made Chris Jericho tap out and thought he'd picked up the victory for his team, but he then realised it wasn't the case, which further fueled his hatred for Claudio. A great visual at the end as all members of the winning team made their way to the top of the cage, stood with their arms aloft. So there you have it. That is every Blood and Guts match so far ranked from worst to best. Do you agree with my picks? Let me know in the comment section below. We are less than a week away from the next Blood and Guts match and the very, very first women's Blood and Guts match in AEW history. Be sure to keep an eye out for my predictions video for that one. It'll be dropping very, very soon. As always, please leave us a like, drop us a comment, and of course, the most important one, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the wrestling group today.